Imagine standing on a beach in the middle of the night. Behind you, the mountain is screaming. The sky is black. Ash is falling. The ground is shaking. And somewhere in the darkness, the sea looks like the only way out. That is where hundreds of people in Herculaneum may have spent their final hours. They were not standing in the streets. They were not frozen in doorways like the victims we often imagine from Pompeii. They had moved. They had run. They had reached the shoreline. And still, the sea could not save them. When people think about the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD, they usually think of Pompeii. They imagine bodies preserved in ash, streets locked in time, and a Roman city buried beneath a storm from the sky. But a few miles away, another town faced the same mountain. Its name was Herculaneum. And in some ways, its story is even more disturbing, because Herculaneum did not simply wait to die. Many of its people appear to have tried to escape. They moved down toward the ancient beach. They gathered inside arched chambers near the waterfront. They may have been waiting for boats. They may have believed the Bay of Naples would become their road to survival. But what came down from Vesuvius was faster than rescue and hotter than imagination. This is the story of the city the sea couldn't save. Before the disaster, Herculaneum was not a place of horror. It was a wealthy seaside town on the coast of Roman Campania. Compared with Pompeii, it was smaller, quieter, and more luxurious. Its houses were decorated with colorful frescoes. Its villas looked toward the water. Its bathhouses, shops, kitchens, and courtyards were filled with ordinary Roman life. The wealthy looked out across the bay at one of the most beautiful landscapes in the Roman world. Above them stood Mount Vesuvius. To modern eyes, the volcano is a warning. But to the people of Herculaneum, it was part of the scenery. A green mountain, a familiar shape, a quiet presence above the town. They did not know they were living beside a sleeping weapon. The danger had signs. In the years before the eruption, earthquakes shook the region. Some buildings were repaired. Some walls still showed damage. But earthquakes were not unusual in Campania. People adapted. They rebuilt. They stayed. That is one of the most terrifying parts of this story. Disaster rarely announces itself clearly. It arrives through signals people can explain away. A tremor becomes normal. Smoke becomes strange, but not final. And by the time the truth is obvious, the choice may already be gone. In 79 AD, Vesuvius erupted. A huge column of ash, gas, and stone rose into the sky. The eruption began as a towering plume, spreading like a dark pine tree above the mountain. The Roman writer Pliny the Younger would later describe the cloud from a distance. His uncle, Pliny the Elder, commanded the Roman fleet across the bay. According to the famous account, Pliny the Elder tried to approach the disaster zone by sea. For the people of Herculaneum, that detail matters. If they knew ships might come, the beach became hope. As ash darkened the sky, some residents of Herculaneum likely chose to leave the upper town and move toward the water. The shoreline in 79 AD was much closer to the city than it is today. At the waterfront stood a row of vaulted chambers. These spaces may have been used as storage rooms or boat shelters. To frightened people, they may have looked like protection. Stone above them. The sea in front of them. A chance of rescue somewhere beyond the darkness. For a long time, archaeologists thought most of Herculaneum's population had escaped. Unlike Pompeii, the excavated town did not reveal large numbers of bodies in houses and streets. The silence seemed almost hopeful. Maybe people had understood the danger. Maybe they had fled in time. Maybe Herculaneum was the rare ancient disaster story where most people survived. Then, in the 1980s, excavators reached the ancient waterfront. Inside the arched chambers facing the beach, they found the answer. Hundreds of skeletons were packed into the boat shelters. Men, women, children, families, people carrying jewelry, keys, and whatever they thought mattered in the last hours of their lives. The discovery changed the story of Herculaneum. The missing victims had not disappeared because they escaped. Many of them had gathered by the sea. They had reached what they thought was the exit. And then, the exit closed. To understand why the sea failed, we have to understand what killed them. Pompeii was buried first by falling pumice and ash. Roofs collapsed. Streets filled. People struggled through darkness and choking air. But Herculaneum faced something different. Because of the direction of the wind, Herculaneum received less of the early pumice fall. That may have made the danger feel less immediate. It may have given people time to move. It may have made escape seem possible. But later, the eruption column began to collapse. When that happened, the mountain released pyroclastic surges. These were not ordinary clouds. They were fast-moving currents of superheated gas, ash, and volcanic debris. They traveled across the ground like burning storms. They did not behave like slow lava. They rushed. They swallowed. They erased. When the first surge reached Herculaneum, it swept through the town and down to the beach. Studies suggest the heat may have been hundreds of degrees Celsius. Some research points to temperatures around 500 degrees Celsius in the first deadly surge. At that temperature, survival is not a question of strength. It is not a question of strength, bravery, or finding shelter a few seconds sooner. The human body cannot endure it. The people in the boat chambers may have died almost instantly. One moment, they were waiting. The next, the air itself became lethal. The tragedy of Herculaneum is that the victims made choices that made sense. They did not simply ignore danger. They moved away from the mountain. They went toward open space. They went toward the sea. They may have gone where rescue ships could reach them. But they were facing a kind of disaster no one in their world truly understood. To them, the threat may have seemed like falling ash, shaking ground, darkness, and fire. They could not have imagined an invisible wall of heat racing faster than a person could run. They could not have known that stone chambers could become tombs. They could not have known that the beach would be buried beneath volcanic material so completely that, centuries later, the ancient shoreline would no longer even touch the sea. After the first surge came more. Herculaneum was buried under a deep mass of volcanic deposits. Buildings filled. Wooden beams carbonized. Doors, furniture, food, and even papyrus scrolls were preserved by the same catastrophe that destroyed the town. In Pompeii, ash made human forms famous. In Herculaneum, heat preserved a different kind of time capsule. Wood survived as charcoal, bread as blackened loaves, and scrolls as fragile carbonized rolls. For centuries, Herculaneum disappeared beneath the earth. People built above it. The ancient town became a hidden world under a modern one. When it was rediscovered, its preservation amazed archaeologists. Upper floors, wooden doors, furniture, and painted walls remain. It was as if the Roman world had been locked underground. But the most haunting discovery waited at the edge of the old sea. The boat shelters reveal something no street or villa can fully explain. They show the final logic of ordinary people in a moment of terror. When the mountain became dangerous, they went where humans have always gone for rescue. They went to the water. The sea has always promised escape. It carries ships away from war. It opens routes to new lands. It gives a person standing on the shore the illusion of distance. But on that night, distance vanished. The disaster did not stop at the city walls, the beach, or the people waiting there. The same force that buried Herculaneum reached everyone waiting by the water. That is why this story is so powerful. It is not only about a volcano. It is about the limits of human instinct. When danger comes from behind us, we run forward. When the land feels unsafe, we look to the sea. When darkness rises, We search for open space. The people of Herculaneum did all of that. And still, it was not enough. Today, visitors can stand near the ancient waterfront and see the arched chambers where the victims were found. The modern sea is farther away now. The coastline has changed. The beach that once looked like salvation became part of the grave. And in those quiet vaults, the story becomes painfully clear. These were not characters in a legend. They were people making desperate decisions with limited knowledge and very little time. Some probably believed rescue was coming. Some may have watched the sky turn black and wondered if morning would ever come. They could not know that their final refuge would become one of archaeology's most devastating discoveries. Herculaneum teaches us that survival is not always about knowing something is wrong. Sometimes people know. They react. They move. They choose the path that seems safest. But history is filled with moments when the danger is larger, stranger, and faster than human imagination. Pompeii shows us a city buried in ash. Herculaneum shows us something even crueler. A city that ran. A city that reached the sea. A city that found hope waiting at the shoreline. And then lost it. The next time we look at Vesuvius rising over the Bay of Naples, it is easy to see beauty. A blue sky. A calm sea. A mountain in the distance. But beneath that beauty is a memory. A night when the earth opened. A town ran toward the water, and the sea, for once, could not save them.